dropped out of uni. It's not as glamorous as a lot of people say it is, by the way, and I'll happily kind of give you that story. And then started a business.
So what is success for you?
I think at a philosophical level, success is just happiness.
I'm Richard Osborne, and this is Drive, the business podcast where I speak to business owners and small business founders about their journeys and the lessons they've learned along the way, helping share this knowledge with you of what makes a small business successful. In this episode, I talked to Ash Phillips. This is somebody who's built his business out of community. Community at the heart of everything he does. And something that is very important and passionate to me and UKBF. It's a fantastic conversation and one you'll want to listen right to the very end. Not least because we debunk the myths around college dropouts, what is an entrepreneur, and everything around running your own business when the odds are against you and perhaps people may perceive it not to be the right choice for you. Ash, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So people who will be listening to this on any of the audio platforms or watching on YouTube, if they are already a follower of UKBF and some of the content that we put out, you're already a familiar face because we've done a webinar where we've spoken about community and community within the business. What I'd like to do is jump straight in because you talk about being a classic uni dropout.
Yeah.
What is a classic uni dropout?
Well, I mean, there's this common theme that seems to run among entrepreneurs, and I don't know whether it is a statistically common theme, but it's certainly like a narrative common theme. We hear about it a lot where people drop out of uni and then they start businesses. I think there are common themes and actual causality that we can draw amongst all of this if we want to explore that. But what I mean by a classic uni dropout is that I dropped out of uni. It's not as glamorous as a lot of people say it is, by the way, and I'll happily kind of give you that story. And then started a business. So it basically makes me a number at the end of the day. It's not even that special anymore, dropping out of uni. It's almost kind of weird if you don't. It's kind of impressive if you don't. But the causality piece for me is, it's a recent realization that there's some level of neurodiversity for me. I'm pre-diagnosis, but I'm 99.9 recurring % sure that ADHD is a real thing for me, which, looking back makes it very obvious that academia probably wasn't going to be the right thing for me. And also, statistically speaking, I'm 3 times more likely to start a business because of having that, or those two things are inherently linked. And so actually, again, I'm even more just a number. So, none of that makes me special. It just means that I'm the same as a lot of other people that have done the same thing, basically.
There's 2 things you mentioned there that I'd love to dig into. I'll roll back round to the ADHD aspect because you mentioned that, and straight away, like my mind goes because it's special educational needs, learning difficulties are topics that are very dear to my heart. Of
course.
From being involved in special needs schools and working in education and from myself, my own family. So I'd love to roll back on that.
Happy.
But I want to pick up on when you say it's not as glamorous as you think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there are stories out there, and I won't name names, but there are stories out there about people that have been to uni and supposedly, maybe true, maybe not, dropped out of university in their first lecture. And for me as an entrepreneur and with maybe, an investor type hat on, I look at that as fairly uninformed risk. That's very flippant to do that quickly. It may be because you are so certain that's not what you want to do and you want to do it instantly and you want to do it as fast as possible and get out and get on to building something. But I think that's pretty reactive, and that's kind of scary to me from a risk mitigation point of view. If that person is then going to go and build a business, it seems like they're very reactive, maybe emotionally reactive, which can be a good or a bad thing in business. So what I did what I think most people probably do, but don't tell the story of because it's a lot more boring, is I deferred for 2 years, right? So the UK education system, as far as I'm aware, certainly at my university, which was the west of England, was allows you to defer for 2 years. So I basically said, look, I might not be right for me. I might have made the wrong decision here. I was 6 months into my first year, just about to come up to exams, wondering whether I should cut my losses. How do I do that? Had a chat with them, and they said, look, you can just pull the plug here, and we'll send you a letter every year. And if you want to come back, you come back and you pick up where you left off. And if you don't reply, then we just know that you didn't want to come back. You've had some uni borrowing. It's fairly cheap, but you still got something you're going to have to pay back at some point. So that's the cost you pay for dropping out, basically. Fine. And then I just be able to make that informed decision, which is what I did. And I never went back. So it is less glamorous then. I dropped out of my first lecture and then I started something and it went amazing. It's cool. But this is a reality, you know. I think there's a lot of BS that goes on in entrepreneurship. I know we're going to dive into that probably later, but yeah, that's the realistic version of the story.
I'm glad you expanded on that and added that, because I'm sitting there in a sales pitch. My daughter's a college dropout. She started college, and very quickly within the first sort of month, a few weeks, she came to us as her parents and said, I'm not learning anything. Because she's very self-motivated. She's done a lot of studying herself in the evenings and put herself through some of the qualifications. And it came to light that at the end of her first year of college, she would have had to resit the same exams that she's already sat when she was 14, 15.
Jeez.
Because in the industry she's in, she already started doing a lot of studying.
Sure.
So she said, I don't want to stick with this.
Yeah.
And then, so we had, same as you, had a conversation with the college and said, what are the options? Can she go up to the next year? Because she's already done this. That was not the option. They wouldn't allow us to do that.
That's wild.
So she ended up dropping out and went self-employed. There's a whole lot of stuff around that.
Yeah.
But it's really good to get a realistic picture behind the university dropout, the college dropout, because I'm on the same view as you. If somebody turns around and just turns up the next day, I'm dropping out.
Yeah.
Whether you're investing into that person, whether you're trading with that person, thinking about it, that's a unthought out situation where you're thinking, hang on a minute, this person's really, are they that unstable?
Yeah, maybe they're just committed, and I'll give everyone the benefit of the doubt always, but I've been around, I'm sure you have too, but been around long enough now to have a solid BS alarm, as I like to call it, and when I hear stories like that, it goes off a little bit and you have to ask yourself some questions. Just due diligence at the end of the day, so it's interesting and good to hear that I wasn't the only one that made a more informed decision. I'm glad your daughter made the right one. Good.
So with you deciding that wasn't right for you at the time, where was your mind? What did you feel at that time was right for you?
So I did business enterprise at uni, which was basically before all these entrepreneurial courses came out, which I probably would have done and may have kept me at uni. Do I agree they're the right thing that people should be paying 30, 50 grand for? I don't know. But it was kind of just after business management courses realized they were a bit boring, and so they're doing something else. And I think it was maybe the 1 year that course existed. So I did that. And I did that because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I came out of college. And I think careers people at colleges are some of the best salespeople. They don't know it because they ask the best closed question of all time, which is, what are you going to do at uni? If you are qualified to go to uni, they just ask you what you're going to do at uni. They don't tell you there are other options. Certainly, that was my experience. Maybe it was different for other people. But, great sales technique, because my answer was, I don't know. What should I do at uni? I don't know what to do. What options are there? And so, you're already down this channel of these are your options at uni. These are the things you're going to do. And at the same time, entrepreneurship started to become a little bit more glamorized. The onset of The Apprentice, when it was a slightly more serious than it is now, and the onset of Dragon's Den, when again it was, I thought it was representative of what a pitch actually looks like, which it not necessarily is, I don't think. But those two things were pretty popular, and so that was happening. And then the other thing that happened was I just thought, I don't come from huge money or anything. How can I earn as much as possible? Of course, that's something that you want to know. And so I look at salary tables and I'm like, okay, we've got dentist, not a big teeth guy, so probably don't want to do that. Pilot, not a big fan of heights, so probably not going to do that. Go through these lists, and there were two options. One was architect, because I like design, and I just found it quite fascinating. I could basically drool for a living. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that, but seeing that it was a 7-year course to get fully accredited and chartered, that's a huge investment for something I wasn't 100% sure on. And then at the top of this salary list is this mysterious title that says managing director, and it was like £0 to unlimited, whereas like pilot was like maybe 120 grand, and I was like, what does that mean? And so all of these things come to a head all at the same time, and I invariably, just to fast forward a little bit, just go, okay, I want to run my own business. And do I need a degree to run a business? Well, if I'm going to be employing myself eventually, then no. I've actually never asked my dentist if they're qualified. They look like a dentist, they work in a dentist's office. I've never seen their diploma. A pilot gets on a plane, they look like a pilot, they're dressed like a pilot. I've never asked to see if they've been qualified or not. And so, if I run my own business, is anybody going to say, where's your degree? Maybe not. So I decided, okay, that's what I want to do. And then I know we'll dive into it, but like didn't have anyone in my family necessarily, direct family or close enough at least, that ran a business. So I couldn't really figure out what to do. Had to make it up as I went along, and couldn't afford to just dive straight in. I didn't have a trust fund, so I worked part-time as a letting agent. I'd done the shelf stacking thing before uni at college, and then was a letting agent for a bit, part-time, whilst building a brand and design agency, and then whilst doing that, realized, okay, it's a bit lonely. I want to meet some people, and as the people would have heard potentially on the webinar that we did, started to meet up, and the rest is history. But that's the origin story.
That's it. Podcast done.
Yeah, complete.
So let's dive into some of that.
Yeah.
So you brushed over quite what I feel is quite an important part.
Sure.
That people who have never run a business never understand. In fact, there's so much of it actually. Let's pick on one part. Is you mentioned you didn't have anyone in your family who had run a business.
Yeah.
There is no degree on being a successful entrepreneur. I'm controversially quite cynical of entrepreneur studies courses. Mm-hmm. There are courses where you study the mindset and entrepreneurs themselves and what is different about somebody that runs a business. Mm-hmm. But as a person, I believe that entrepreneurs are created by their environment.
Yeah.
The path of entrepreneurialism is seen as a route to solve something within that environment. You've just said that how can I make as much money as possible? My takeaway from that is literally like you had none.
Yeah.
So if you have no money, how can I make more money? Because money is the thing that fixes everything. If you're in that situation, you're sitting there thinking, all of these problems that go around me, they'll just go away if I just have more money.
Yeah.
You're nodding there. So is that pretty
yeah, I mean, it's pretty accurate. I've had long enough now to think about it, looking backwards and wondering, because at the time you don't really realize that stuff, but you look back and you go, okay, well, what was really the stimulus? And for anybody that's been through therapy or been lucky enough to afford to do it privately, it's never too surprising because of what we've seen in popular culture that a lot of stuff that you do within your life is because of what happened in childhood. And so, what are we exposed to? And again, this is maybe a generalization or a stereotype, but people that come from wealthy backgrounds often end up doing something that's quite socially impactful because they already have the means, and there might be some level of guilt of the fact that, okay, I want to give back now. The Branson story, Sam Branson does a lot with charity, and I think Richard Branson's daughter does too. Interesting kind of to observe, maybe a generalization, or maybe nuance, but interesting to observe. And then the people that I know that don't come from money are seeking it. It's always a want for something you don't have. And there's a saying, obviously, that everyone knows that is a good illustration of that, which is the grass is always greener, right? It was a want for something that I didn't have, and also a challenge. I don't know how to put this, but if I can run I don't know, a mile, then why set myself the challenge of running a mile and 10 yards, right? That's super achievable. It's not super exciting. It's not going to drive me for a lifetime to just be able to get over that hurdle. I'll probably say, okay, why can I run 26 of these? And that's my version. If I didn't have any money, then how do I make £100? Is the same as the first analogy, and it's not super exciting. I can't do much with that. But if I have no money, how can I make 1 million? That's way more interesting. It's a big challenge, and it might drive me for a lifetime. So I guess that was what I was trying to find. And so all of that came to a head, and decide maybe entrepreneurship is the route forward. And certainly, again, looking backwards, was probably blinded by a lot of the glamorization of it, and looking at it as something that would be awesome. You've seen it, I've seen it, we've all seen it, that lots of people start businesses just so they can put, certainly nowadays, put that title in their Instagram bio because it makes them feel like they achieved something. And I'm not talking down on people, because I was that guy. And then you do it for long enough that you realize this isn't what satisfaction is. That's a very cheap dopamine hit. Now I need to actually build something, and that's when the hard stuff begins.
So why did you not just start straight away? You mentioned that you then started working part-time and let an agency, on a salary. What stopped you from just not doing that and just going full-time into running the business, starting with nothing?
Yeah, good question. I mean, one, I didn't know that you could do that. It's the only, I said in the webinar previously, but like, it's the only job in the world that you don't get onboarded to. And I'm still trying to find a job that proves that wrong. There might be one, and I'm waiting. But yeah, so it's a wilderness. You just go, if you work in a pub, someone shows you how to pull a pint. If you do brain surgery, hopefully someone shows you how to do it. But if you start a business on a Monday, you just go, okay, I've started now. Yeah. And then you look around and nothing's changed. And you're just left to your own devices. And that's scary. We seem to be okay with the failure rate of companies in the UK and worldwide. But if the failure rate was the same for university dropouts, it'd be a national inquiry, it'd be fixed tomorrow. So what are we doing to fix that? We're not. I think maybe more should be done, and thankfully things like UKBF exist to be able to answer those questions. But I didn't know where those resources were, and so I basically decided, okay, I'm going to need to give myself a bit of a runway here. I need to cover my I need to pay my parents rent-wise. I need to pay to, frankly, at that age, go out every week. I don't even know how I afforded to do that, but all of that stuff at the same time. So I need a little bit of cash coming in, and then the rest of the time I'm just going to spend reading business for dummies, or on YouTube, figuring out how to build websites, and doing everything I needed to do to hustle my way up the chain, basically, and say yes to things that felt uncomfortable. And after a while, you get to a point where you realize, oh, actually, I'm a bit too busy now to do this stuff. What do I do? It's that impasse where it's like, am I too busy? Should I still work? And I remember chatting to a friend of mine at the time, who has done really well for herself since, but she was just like, you just have to take the leap. It's like swimming without armbands. You can either decide that you're just going to drown straight away, or you can at least try, and who knows, you may learn how to swim. And I think that's it. The real analogy that people use is jumping out of a plane, building a parachute on the way down, that kind of thing. So as long as you've got all the parts for the parachute, that's the important thing. And so I think, using that analogy, I didn't want to jump out of the plane without the parts. That was probably the thing.
It's reason behind the question, because I sometimes get asked, when's the best, when should I start my business? And my general answer is now.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, when are you? There's never going to be the right time. There's never going to be, it's never going to feel safe. It's always going to be nervous. But that point in time when you said, right, when do I make the leap? When I do this? Nothing quite beats what I would define as the fear factor, that any comfort blanket, safety net, parachute, anything you've got around you that's giving you that little bit of safety, as soon as that cord is cut, that's it. You're there. Then you literally, you've got nothing else around you that's going to save you. You're full on.
Yeah.
You went into marketing. Any particular reason behind the choice?
Honestly, I think, and people might shout at me for this, but it is one of the easiest in businesses that you can get, because in the age of the internet, because you can teach yourself to, build websites fairly easily. A lot of the platforms that you can use are, fairly available. At the time I was building them, the ones that don't exist right now didn't exist then. I was building websites on Dreamweaver, if anybody knows. Remembers
flash
what
from
that
the
was.
past, yeah.
Yeah, we'd learn it in college, and I built an okay one, and was like, well, maybe if I keep going, I can learn a bit more of this. So we did. And then I learned a bit of Photoshop, and still to this day, I only design stuff on Photoshop, which designers will shoot me for, because I should be doing it on Illustrator or something else by now, probably. But all of it was just self-taught. And so, I did that because those programs were accessible. I got a bootleg version of Adobe from, the internet, because I couldn't afford the package at the time, which was huge, like £2,000, £1,000, something like that. And so, yeah, it was an easier in than me needing, let's say, thousands of pounds to buy product from somewhere and resell it. Or, it was a time for money business. I could have washed windows, but even then I would have still needed some money for product. Marketing was, I have a laptop and I have some time and I'm creative. I did art at college. I did IT at college. I also did sports science, which is good for life, but hasn't helped me in business that much. And so I combined the art piece and the IT piece and turned it into, okay, maybe I can create something on the internet. And yeah, the rest, the rest was just reactive. Oh, you've done me a website. Can you build me a logo now? Yeah, great. I remember costs. I don't know how I got this contract, but someone I knew worked for Costa in their marketing department. They were hosting some weird like comedy coffee tour thing, and someone was like, "Oh, can you also take pictures as well?" And I was like, "I don't have a camera, but if I just say yes." So I said yes, and then became a photographer for the week. You just do that, and then all of a sudden you've got a service list as a marketing agency, and away you go, and a camera that I probably couldn't afford. But yeah, so that's why.
Whilst I've got your attention, as a business owner myself, I'd like to tell you about a new venture that we've launched alongside UKBF, which is Smart Business, a business comparison site where our first product is business insurance. Working with leading provider, Simply Business, we enable you to compare a wide range of insurance products from leading insurance companies to find the cover that is right for you. Go to smartbusiness.co.uk. Compare, decide, job done. That's Smart Business. It obviously got off the ground and got running. How long before, if at all, did it enable you to pay a mortgage?
Yeah, so I'm a millennial, which means I don't have a mortgage. I don't know what one of those is. But when did it start paying me enough to basically, be a genuine profession? I don't think in the marketing agency, I don't think it did. No, that's a lie. It did. And I can tell you when it did. It's just funny, like dates just blur for me sometimes, and I try and remember events, big gaps in history. But the easiest way to explain this to start off with is that I think the way I think about building businesses to the point where they get really validated and they actually work for you is like a dartboard, right? So what I mean by that is that there are 3 rings on this proverbial dartboard, and the first ring is all the people that you know directly, and they're going to be really nice about what you're doing, but they actually don't care, which is really sad. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, it looks amazing. I had a clothing company for a year. Everyone told me it was amazing. No one wore it." And I was like, "Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Do you actually care?" It's because they know me too well. There's no mystery factor, right? Second ring of that dartboard are the people that are secondhand connections, the people that are friends of people They actually ironically probably value this stuff more because they get to provide their own value perception to what you do, and they might actually ironically pay a bit more for it, at least ask you for less deals because they know you less. When things are actually starting to work is when the third ring clicks in, which is someone you've never met and you don't know, and referrals fine aside, but people that are third step connections where people start to pay you for services and they provide their own value perceptions and you get to kind of orchestrate what that is. And it's at that point I think stuff actually starts to happen for people. It's great if you can make the first one work, great if you can make the second one, great if you can make them all work, but like we all have to generally just move through that mix to start with. And so I think I started to get to that third ring of people after probably 2 years, frankly. It probably should have moved faster. If I had the fear and didn't have the income, maybe I would have, but I can't regret things. It's all in the past. And then I remember I did a joint project with someone. I'm a big space geek. And I'm from Filton, which is just north of Bristol, and that's where Concorde was flown and last landed. And so aerospace is a big industry there. And there was this company called Bristol Space Planes. I don't know if it still exists. I need to find out. It was run by a guy who at the time was 80 something and was part of the Cold War spy kind of reconnaissance plane missions. And his opinion, if Cold War didn't happen, we'd have space tourism by now. And he wanted to use some of the technology that he used in that time period to create horizontal takeoff and landing suborbital space flight. So no rockets, planes, they can go to space essentially. And I just found it fascinating. I was like, just tell me what you need. I won't charge you. I just want to be involved in this. It's really cool. Give me a seat one day if it becomes a thing. Like that's where I'm at. But his branding was terrible because obviously he was 80 something and in the aerospace industry. Never done this. Let me build you a website. I'll build you a brand. It'll be cool. We'll figure it out. And he also brought in a company to help with crowdfunding. They were a social specialist in social. Strategic level, not just tweets for pounds, but this was maybe 11 years ago now, and so this was at a time before people really knew what to do properly with social, and we worked on it together and we got on really well, and then we hang out a bit and we were like, well, this works. I've got services that you can't provide that I can bring to the table. You've got customers and one if not two members of staff that I don't currently have and I can't figure out how to jump to, so let's just work together. Let's merge. And merge is a strong word for a company of one person and maybe one or two other people. But we partnered basically for a year. And at that point, we became something a bit more. We had some proper clients. My business partner brought bigger clients to the table. We had Longley, we had Wild Beer, we had Bodine's Barbecue in London. We had some fun clients, good names. And that was when I was able to pay myself a proper salary, basically. And it was a number of years, 3-4 years to just get to that point. But that gives the whole story, basically.
You touched on it a moment ago, that people will start a business and the first thing they do is they'll put entrepreneur in their LinkedIn job description or Instagram bio, whatever it might be. But that experience in its own, it debunks a lot of what the realism is in sort of becoming a business owner.
Yeah, I think people are, again, generalizing here, but I think people are generally driven by one of three things, if not a bit of each. You're either driven by money because of the childhood thing that we touched on. You're driven by impact, probably because of the childhood thing that we touched on, and or you're driven by some level of, and for want of a better word, some level of narcissism, which probably exists for most business owners because we probably wouldn't do it if we didn't have that level of confidence, delusion, self-belief, something in there that we can be the person to do this, and it's probably one of, if not a bit of each of those, and so that drives you through that period. But that narcissism piece is the bit that can get ticked off too easily because of that kind of Instagram bio effect, right? You start something, automatically you got your first set of business cards. You feel like a success, but there's no money in the bank account. Actually, it's less because you spent 60 quid on your business card. So what are you going to do? And the reason I'm passionate about breaking this down is not because I want to knock people down. It's not because I want to knock the entrepreneurial profession back. Quite the opposite. I want to bring it forward. So I'd love to see more people run their own businesses. And I think in today's world, cost of living, I think they're going to have to, because they need to find income from somewhere. Maybe there's a revolution of small businesses around the corner and we go back to more of a trading society because we have to. Who knows? It's maybe a different podcast. But what I'm trying to say is that I want people just to be more realistic about it. And the reason for that is because they owe it to themselves. They shouldn't. I've done it, and I don't want other people to do what I've done, which is to be rewarded by the stuff that isn't paying for an okay lifestyle for too long. And to see that as going through the hard stuff and the necessary, chew the glass and be in the dirt and all of that. It's okay to be successful, and by that I mean to pay yourself a salary and have an okay life, and especially when we get to the investing stuff later on, Like that doesn't mean you need to build a unicorn or $1 billion company. You know, £10 million is statistically puts you in the 1%, the 0.1%, the 0.001% probably. I don't know what the stats are, but you know, just building something that makes sense, that then is worthy of the title of business owner makes sense. You know, don't do it the other way around. Otherwise, you trick yourself into feeling like you've got the reward already, and then 2 years later you realize there's no money in your bank account and you resent the whole thing. So that's why I want to break that down. It's just to be more realistic. Sell something. Ideally, sell something for more than it costs to make it, and then you're onto something. And then add founder to your bio.
There's this great opportunity here, and you know, I'll pay you later. It's in whatever way it's polished up. It's ultimately work for free.
Yeah.
And you might get paid later because this is going to be on TV type stuff. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I did. And you know what? I've kind of tread the line here, because I'm like, we both know that is useful, but only if it's done in the right way. I know that. I won't speak for you, but I believe that it's useful if it's only if it's done in the right way, and it needs to be done in a way where every single party wins and wins properly from it. Yeah. Otherwise, the moment somebody doesn't win in that relationship is the moment it breaks, and is the moment that it doesn't work. And so that promise has to be real, and it has to be achievable and deliverable, because the moment it's not is the moment it becomes exploitation. Yeah. You know, you can't pay your rent with social currency. We actually ran an April Fool's campaign a couple of years ago when the company was called Yena. This is the business I run now, different, was called Yena, and we announced it. It was the time blockchain was kind of becoming a thing, and we announced we were launching the Yena coin on the Yena card, and I flippantly wrote a press release and stole Apple's credit card picture, sorry Apple, and put my own logo on it and photoshopped it, made it pink, people like that, and we announced that we were launching something. And this fake press release I wrote, there was a line in there that basically said, hey, look, you know, I've helped a huge amount of people over the last 10 years. I'm not rich yet. If I could pay my rent with social currency, I'd have an incredible place to live right now, but I can. So we're inventing a way to do that. And I wasn't. It was a April 1st, you know. I got inbound though emails from people that were like, this is insanely cool. How are you doing it? When are you doing it? When are you launching it? And I was like, guys, check the date. So, you know, classic me, and we'll get to this maybe another time, thinks maybe there's something there. I should maybe do something about that. But actually, you know, it does remind me that there's a lot of that out there. But I think people need to just put a safeguard up. Most of the reason that falls apart is because of imposter syndrome. And it's like, maybe I'm not worth that. And so what I do with clients I have now, if I work as an advisor on a regular basis, and sometimes they're individuals and they're freelancers. So one of the exercises I get them to do is I get them to just understand how much their actual hourly rate is. And it's an immovable hourly rate, by simply going, well, how much do you think you should be earning this year based on, you know, normal rates for someone that's in your industry, your level of seniority, and simply, you know, the lifestyle you think that's affordable, achievable, accessible within the next year. Let's say they come up with a number that's like 40 grand, 50 grand, 30 grand, whatever the number is. And then we divide it by the number of working hours in the year. And then generally we divide that by 50%, because you're not going to bill every single hour. And you're going to do admin for the other half and biz dev and all of that. And you come up with a number which is, okay, that's my hourly rate. And as soon as you say no, or you let someone in on reducing that or not actually paying for it, you're taking away from that end of the year number. And so as soon as you say, hey, yeah, I'll give you a 50% discount, you're making the decision to not be worth 50 grand. You're making the decision that 25 grand this year is okay. And if that's what you want, then cool. But I always do that with people, because it seems to just give them, even with imposter syndrome, that little bit of extra, just logical confidence, not just emotional confidence, but I can do the maths. What decision am I really making here? And then they overcome it. So
it's also an area of vulnerability, because for me, and I don't think everybody does this intentionally, but what's actually happening is you have somebody maybe with imposter syndrome in a position of desperation for work, who could be spending their time doing all other stuff to drive revenue, but they haven't been boarded into the job of business owner. There isn't the course you go to that tells you how to do all this. So you'll find yourself an incidental business owner, and you're desperate, and you're clutching at every possible straw, to the point where the other person is ultimately, and I'm glad you used the term because I agree with it, it can lead into exploitation.
Yeah.
And that person is, whether they're intending to or not, is exploiting somebody who's in a very vulnerable position in their business life. So yeah, it's still the same myself.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure you mentioned the Rebel meetup stuff, so I don't want to jump ahead, but just to be very clear, we use a mechanism like the mechanism we just described, but in the right way, to build that to where it's got to today. And so, yeah, I'll happily talk about how the right way, I think at least, it should be done as well.
Well, meetup's a great point because your mission statement and everything behind what led to creating meetups is very closely aligned with why UKBF was created to exist as well.
Yeah.
In that, when you're running a business when you are a business owner, it's lonely. You don't have people to turn to. You've not been to. If you start at school, there isn't a lesson. You've got maths, English, geography. Nothing along there is incorporate companies, register for tax, register for VAT, manage your cash flow, the sales and marketing opportunities. So today's world, social media marketing, P&L, all these things you need to know about and more.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist on the curriculum.
Crazy.
So you're running a business, and generally, by myself, nobody around me to ask questions to, yourself, nobody around to ask questions to. So what do? You try and create an environment that brings people together in that same position. That's what I read about Meetup, and you're nodding that is.
Yeah,
what led to it.
I basically, it's pretty much long and short of it. I was going to networking events for the marketing business. I was finding that at, what was I, maybe at the time 21, I was the youngest person in the room who was talking about, houses and kids and holidays, and I didn't know what any of those things were. And that wasn't a problem because it became a talking point of why, who are you? You got this baby faced guy in the room, what are you doing here? It was definitely one or two occasions where people asked me to get them an orange juice because they thought I worked there, which was a great talking point as well, which is, it's a great talking point for me, but for the wrong person could be the thing that puts them off for life. So that's really interesting and something to I guess, rhetorically think about. But I was doing it and I was just like, you know what, culturally this is a bit awkward because I want to talk to people that get it. They're at my life stage. They understand it. My parents don't get it. They probably never will, bless them. They're very supportive. Every Facebook post we get gets liked by mostly just them. And my friends, again, super supportive, but that inner ring thing where they say that they're there and they get it and they are emotionally there for me, but they don't really get it. They're talking about their 2% pay rise at Christmas, if that, and I'm talking about the fact that I might be rich or broke, and that's fun to me for some reason, sadistically. So I wanted to find people like me, so I set up a network. Called it YENA, which at the time was the Young Entrepreneur Networking Association. Big old mouthful, but it sounded sounded official. I was a brand guy. That was the one thing I could do well, was brand things up and make them look good at least. Posted that on LinkedIn and a couple of other platforms, and I think we got 6 people around a bar in Bristol, just having a beer. And it was the first time that I felt I found my crowd. I found my people. They get me, and I get them. And unbeknownst to me at the time, they all said at the end, at the event, when's the next one? This was great. And I said, I don't know, next month. And then we run them ever since, basically. Got out of hand. So yeah, it was the same reason that you set up UKBF. Yeah, lonely, trying to share, learn, connect, and we did it in a physical format.
What speaks volumes about it though is how big did that get? How many? Yeah,
so we ran them in Bristol for a bit, and then someone came from Bath. They were like, it's just a bit annoying on the train. Can we run one there? And I said, yeah, sure. Yeah. And then we did 2. And then we did one in London. And then someone came from Sheffield, which is a 4-hour drive to Bristol, which is crazy. But okay, maybe we're scratching more itches than just mine. This is interesting. What are we really doing here? Then we did one in Birmingham. And at one point I was on the motorway, London, Birmingham, Manchester, Bath, Bristol, Cardiff, every month. No money because the events have always been free and will always be free. In my car, coming back from every event the same night, bearing in mind these are in the evening because I couldn't afford to stay in hotels. So Manchester event would get me home at like 1:30 a.m. and I'd be out for work the next day. Then I do a podcast with someone in London asking about the meetups, kind of full circle really, a bit meta. And she's like, it sounds great. I'm going back home soon. Can I run one there? I said, where's home? She said, Melbourne. And I was like, I'm not well travelled. I've barely been out of the continent. I don't think I actually had at that point. And sure, let's do it. And then pre-COVID, we were running 100 events a year, 21 cities, 9 countries, 5,000 people a year, all completely free. And those people, just as we spoke about in our webinar, were a community of people that all had common denominators. And that common denominator was they were doing something that broke the status quo, something that was different to their peers. They were, as we now describe them, rebels, hence the rebel meetups. And fast forward, COVID killed every event that we had for obvious reasons. I'm bringing them back now. So, it's been a wild ride.
You talk about what does success look like. And if I try and relate to that, for me, it's changed over the time. The awards in the early days, I stopped entering awards and stuff years ago. But at the time, they almost acted as a bit of an affirmation because the money wasn't there. Yeah. But at least it was something that was almost like a secondary sort of pat on the back. The first part you mentioned earlier about the point where you can you can pay yourself. That's like I'm getting paid now to work.
And no one knows that, by the way. There's no one around to pat you on the back, send you a card that says congrats on your salary. That card doesn't exist. No. But yeah.
So a few years longer the line, and I actually get more satisfaction now of watching other people's successes as opposed to what does success look for me, because the reality is I'm happy. Yeah. It sounds like a really corny thing to say. And it would be different if something happened to the business, heaven forbid, and I can't pay the mortgage or something like that. My priorities would refocus because I'd have to think about family. But at the moment, my family's okay. I'm content. I don't have a yacht, don't have a plane. I'm not a multi-millionaire and all these other things where there's like a balance sheet measurement. That crazily doesn't actually mean a lot to me. Yeah. There are other people it will, and that's fine. Everybody has their own motivations. But for me, I'm actually happy. Yeah. So to see other people. So what is success? Some people would look and say, well, Richard, you're very successful. Other people will look at me and go, what? You drive an I-Pace. So you drive an I-Pace. Where's your Bentley? Yeah. If I had the money, I wouldn't buy a Bentley. Yeah, it's probably not a good investment. Yeah. It's a depreciating asset. Exactly. Just like, I can't justify it. Yeah. But it's an interesting question to ask. Yeah. But it's something very personal to individuals as to what measures. I noticed you didn't answer it for yourself. So what is success for you?
I think at a philosophical level, success is just happiness. For me and anybody else, I think, because happiness is derived from different things. So it's kind of a cheating answer. Like, as long as I am happy, then by definition, things can't be wrong. And therefore that is success. Am I shortcutting myself and allowing me to cheat to the answer? Maybe. But, happiness, therefore, what is happiness for me? It's the ability to do good, because that's not altruistic. It reminds me of the episode of Friends where Phoebe is trying to find a genuinely good deed and she can't because she feels good about doing something. She's like, no, it's genuinely not altruistic. So doing something for other people because it makes me feel good, ergo happy. I used to think it was money, but it can't be because I've not made a huge amount of it yet. And so if it was, I would have put more effort into that. And so in hindsight, I go, well, therefore I can't be driven by money as much as I thought it was. I thought it was, maybe it's not. it's probably impact. And impact is then also related to probably the narcissism piece, because it allows me to do things like this, which make me feel good and, make me feel important and fine. So happiness is probably feeling valued and being valuable to others, which are inherently linked. The idea is that you do enough of those two things for long enough, well enough, that they become valuable enough that someone pays you well for them, and great, you're good to go. It just reminds me of that Japanese kind of ikigai philosophy. Do something that you love, something you can get paid for, something that allows you growth, makes you feel happy, all of those things. The middle of that circle is success to me. And that the reason I like that as an answer is because it differs for lots of people. If you're happy earning no money but being able to surf every weekend, you're successful. That's amazing. If you're happy being a banker trading in oil, don't really care too much about the planet, then in your world, you're successful. If you're happy with that because you've got a yacht, great, that's amazing, and that's why me and my dad have this fun conversation sometimes where we think about what success actually is, because he looks at someone like, not coming from a business background, looks at someone like Jeff Bezos and he goes, why does he need a bigger yacht? And I'm like, that's because you're measuring his success on materialism, money, and undoubtedly he's driven by money, because he wouldn't be as rich as he is right now if he wasn't. But once you've got a yacht as big as he's probably got, if there's a bigger one, why is he really buying it? There's only one person that can use it. It's because he wants progress, and progress is probably the thing that makes him happy, which is probably driven by massive insecurity, but that's a whole other conversation. So yeah, that's what makes me happy is being of value and feeling of value.
Do you, when you think about the journey and your motivation to start being driven by money at the start, can you sense the changing or evolution of what is driving you and what is making you your why change over time? Yeah,
100%. Like I recently finished reading a book called Range. It's a fantastic book. It's about the power of generalists. And it talks about how actually it's kind of unreasonable to assume that we're the same person throughout our lives. We actually change very substantially every decade even. And so to expect to be the same person, in 10 years is unreasonable. And actually, the book talks about that in careers and business sense. And I've seen that myself. I'm 33 now, single, no kids. So, in the back of your mind, things start to creep in. You're like, okay, I don't have as much as, the opposite sex, the body clock, as much to worry about. It still comes into mind. You start to think about, what do relationships look like? When should I be doing this? Do I earn enough to be someone that I would want to be with? And do I earn enough to be able to pass on something to, dependents that I don't currently have? How much is an engagement ring if I needed to?
A lot of money.
Like all of those things. I don't have a mortgage right now. Is that okay? Is that a problem? Am I buying too many avocados like the memes say I am? Like, all of these things come to play. And so I think I started off probably with money, naively thinking it was money, and it probably wasn't. Went into the self-serving piece of, narcissistic kind of reward mechanisms, which drive a lot of people now, thanks to our devices in our pockets, and ticking those boxes, and then eventually getting frustrated at having that I guess perception of success, but not actually being able to live that. I can't go on holiday whenever I want right now. One, because I'm either tied into the business, and or because I have the money to spend on it. That doesn't feel like success to me. And so I'd be seeking flexibility via money. So is money still success? Maybe not. I do feel it changing, and I do see it changing. And I think it changes for a lot of people. But that's when you do things like sell the business, buy the business back. You probably changed during those years as well, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to, let me rephrase it, because I can only speak from my own perspective.
Sure.
I have to have something I'm going for to give me the motivation as a tangible measure. And at one point during that journey was a home that my children would grow up in, that was, I was able to lay down roots. And them to have a comfortable life. Ironically, I wouldn't want my kids to have everything. I don't want them to turn around and go, my daughter winds me up and stuff. And very proud because she owns a handful of horses, but she's run her business for nearly 5 years now. And fuck me, excuse my language. Yeah, it really is nearly 5. You'll have to beep that one. Nearly 5 years. And and she's earned the money to build these up for a riding school that she's doing. So then she turns around, she has this little like meme sort of thing, "Daddy, I want another pony." And it's that sort of, it's like joking with it, but the reality, no. And she says, so I'm not even putting words into her mouth here, that I want to prove that I do this myself, not on Daddy's money. Yeah. Which makes me prouder. Yeah. And it's the same sort of thing where you want, I want them to be comfortable. Yeah. Because I wasn't. I want them to have a home where there's roots because I didn't have that. Yeah. So all these things, that's my drive. We've got that now. So what next? Yeah. And I can actually feel and know the period of time within this business where I hadn't realigned another goal to go for, because there wasn't anything that I actually, and there isn't anything that I actually want, or should I say need, because we always want something. Was anything I actually need strong enough to be a personal objective goal? Yeah. And during that time, I actually knew at the time, I wasn't as motivated as I was when I had something to aim for. So I've changed throughout those times as the times go on, and now have a goal, we have a business plan, we have objectives we're going for, and I'll share with the team. The team know what these are, and I'm fired up again. Yeah. And it is having to know that you're evolving, know that okay, I've reached that point in life. My ambitions have changed because I've matured. My life around me, my circle of friends, whatever it is, has changed around me as well. Yeah. So I need to keep up with it. This is where I am now. Right, I'm aiming for that. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That complacency creeps in, which affects, business performance, which definitely happened to me too, with things like being close to bankruptcy and stuff too. Yeah. I'm curious how you say, always needing something to drive towards. I'm wondering if I'll ever retire, but I'll be a very different person in 30, 40. I mean, when am I ever going to be able to retire is a bigger question when economics is concerned. But I wonder. So with you needing to drive towards something, and you mentioning, maybe 10, 15 years, just retire, move on. Do you think you'd sit still? I'm always worried that I'd have twiddly thumbs. I'd need to start something, do something. No, my wife would kill me. So much. So at that point, your motivation is survival. Yes. I know what I want to do. The business from a day is generally autonomous. So for me, at some point, I need to exit the business, and that's a sale. Nice. And I've had investors come and invest in this business. So you work in these circles, you deal with investment, and as somebody who's received investment, I know they believed and backed me. So I'm looking forward to them having a big paycheck at the end of it, angel invest, and just doing really well because I was asked at a networking event once. I was given a talk about. So I said, well, doesn't it begrudge you that there's some other people that own some shares in your company? So why would it? I went into investment with my eyes open. And you'll know this. So an angel investor, they put money in looking for a return out. Yeah. They're not looking. It's not cold calculated in that. So angel investors are more personable. Yeah, way softer. Than some corporate VC avenues. Many, yeah. But they're in it. They want an angel investor exists because the angel investor is usually a high net worth business person who wants to roll their sleeves up and still be involved in business. And I had an idea where I could take the business to the next level. The irony is my idea was over here, built on various foundations of a fair bit of naivety. Sure. And so the business plan was rewritten, reworked on, and the business wouldn't be where it was today without that angel investment and their input. Yeah. If you asked a 20-year younger version of myself, would you have non-exec directors on your board? I'd be like, grey-haired old men who ain't got
Yeah.
a clue what they're talking about and, past their prime and sort of stuff. That was my attitude.
Yeah.
Now, 20 years wiser, that's made a difference. That is really like gold.
Interesting.
And so I want to pay it forward. I want to invest in some businesses. I want to be a non-exec director and advise other people and just sort of help their businesses achieve more than they may have done without my involvement. That kind of position.
Yeah.
I've also got another few little ventures in the back of my head that is driving my wife nuts because she said, "You said you would never start a business up again." I'm like, "Where?"
That's the curse.
The-
I've got a mental shelf with like 14 other ideas that just sat behind here.
Yeah.
Now I will happily give to other people because I don't have no time to run them. So if anybody wants to run them, I'll give them away for sure.
It is that level though of never really retiring.
Yeah.
Previous guest on here, one of the dragons, Dragonstone funny, Theo Profitis, I asked him the questions saying, why don't you some would say you could literally just stop now, you've got enough money, you've got that level of success. And he said, but when you retire, don't you, isn't that so you can do what you want to do and do what you enjoy doing? And he enjoys business and being involved in small businesses.
Yeah.
So he effectively is retired. He's doing what he wants to do. And I think I'd be the same.
I agree. I think I'll be the same too. Maybe the businesses will change, the projects will change. Maybe there'll be different outputs, But I think I'll probably be the same. But I'll have to come back on in 30 years and we can talk about it then. Yeah.
So looking back, so you've been on that journey, and you've been, you've experienced the points of literally you're still you fight through your business and hand to mouth, and you're involved in angel investments, VC work at that other end. So that full spectrum.
Yeah.
If we wrap that up to to a point, if you go back to a younger version of yourself, so at the very start of that journey where you've decided you're looking at a list of salaries and what I'm going to do, what would be the 3 pieces of advice you'd give yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Always get stuck on this one, just because there's so many things I would tell myself. Like mostly, just don't bother. To be honest, it's not worth it. No, that's a lie. I think the first thing is, and you always want to pick something different to what everybody else has said, obviously, because there's some obvious things. But the first thing is like not to limit ambition. I think is an important thing. We get held back by, we're the sum of the people that we surround ourselves with, or whatever the saying is, but we get held back by other people's perceptions of what you could achieve. And I think that, that defines where we can potentially go. Everything that you've ever heard of company-wise, or anyone you've ever heard of, was just someone with a dream at one point. And I don't want to be the person who was on that, other famous podcast saying we've all got the same 24 hours in a day, because we don't. Beyonce's 24 hours are very different to my 24 hours, but we've got opportunity, some sort of opportunity. We go to sleep and we wake up, and stuff happens in between there, and there's going to be a minute in there where we can choose to do something different. And so don't let those limitations define your potential. I think will probably be one thing I say, that you're here, this is where you're at right now. You could be anywhere you want in 10 years. Part of where you're going to be able to go is the self-fulfilling prophecy of what you tell yourself. And that confidence, delusion, whatever you want to call it, is one of the defining factors. So, drink the Kool-Aid, tell yourself that you're going to be at that point, believe it, become it. And I don't mean that in a whimsical, overly holistic way. I think there's a lot of practicality to it. And then just lean in and try not to listen to what everybody else said. Frankly, if I had listened to what lots of people said, I wouldn't have started a lot of the time anyway. I remember putting my first just post out on Facebook. It's before Facebook ads were a thing, and just talking about what I did. And someone said to me, I remember exactly who it was, Steve. And
we'll tag him when it's
yes, I'll tag him in it. And he said, why are you posting about this on Facebook? No one on Facebook's going to buy anything. And I'm like, that's funny. 10 years later, oh my God, well, yeah, you've just basically told Mark Zuckerberg that one of the biggest businesses in the world may not exist. opinions are kind of worthless. And then I think the other thing, so that's one. 3 might be tough, but certainly one of the other things will be to enjoy it. You know, it's an adventure, one of the craziest ones you can go on, probably. And you know, when times get tough, it can be easy to forget that it's a bit of a privilege to have the ability to have that tough time. Weirdly, you know, I get to do this. I get to do this. Yeah. Last week was having a really bad time. I get to sit in front of my computer and have a bad time. You know, old me stacking shelves at Sainsbury's couldn't afford to think about having a bad time because I was too busy trying to figure out which potato goes where. So that, yeah, enjoy it and don't limit ambition, I think. And actually, I guess the final one is one that I do say fairly often because it's more of a reminder to myself than anybody else. But lots of people forget this too, and it's so simple, which is just don't forget to sell something. Like so many people do all of the minutiae and they forget the product and the commerce part of business. Especially nowadays, I build a tech company and exit it, and I'm like, okay, great, how are you going to make some money along the way? Someone might need some. The one company you've seen on TechCrunch that sold for $1 bazillion that didn't ever make any money is statistically the biggest anomaly that you can read about. So sell something, enjoy it, and don't limit ambition. Those are probably the 3 things I'd say to myself.
That's brilliant.
Whether I'd listen or not, it's a very different question. But yeah,
it's amazing the how as you go through the journey, your mindset changes and you do become more receptive to other people's advice.
Yeah.
Where the irony is at the very start, it's probably when you need the most.
Yeah, what is it? That curve, right? Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? So you just, you're at the top of that curve, you think you know everything, and then you realise you know nothing, and then you start on the way back up. And I think I'm on the way back up on that curve now. So yeah, talking about the investors and advisors piece, like I'm doing that. You know, I'm working on something new, and I know what my weaknesses are now. So I'm just picking the people that plug those weaknesses and going, okay, you seem awesome. Like, I want A players on my team. You're the A player in the space. I know a bit about that. Old me would have thought I knew everything about that. You know way more than I know about that. I want you on my table, and I'm going to give you some of this company and doing that with the right people. And thinking about it like a marriage, you know, picking people that I want to have dinner with in 7 years when things have gone wrong or great. But regardless, knowing they're going to be there for a good time. So yeah, it's just about surrounding yourself with those people now, for me anyway.
Absolutely. It sounds like a fantastic journey, still ongoing.
Very much so, yeah. Very much so. It's just about to start again. Why not?
We go again. Ash, it's been fantastic chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me, and you too.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Drive. I hope you found it insightful and useful. But before I go, have a look at the app you're listening to this podcast on. See that follow button? Give it a press, and you'll be notified of all future episodes as they come out. It also helps us understand where most of our followers are and where to really be pushing this podcast to.